What do we mean when we talk about the in-between, the nexus of our lives, of our reality? So often when we look back at our lives, we look at the milestone moments, these plateaus and footprints that we leave behind as markers of our life's journey. That only makes up about 20 to 30%. The rest is defined and connected by the in-between. Everything that takes place in between. And this is where the art of the spiritual warrior comes in. We can develop the tools and the means to identify all these different elements in our world and become the alchemists of our lives, peering through the nexus and the prism of our multiverse, and drawing forth all that we are into the present now. Oh, hello. Great to see everybody again on this beautiful Friday. Up at my mountain little town here. It's gloomy, but we didn't get snowed on this week, thankfully. Last week we got snowed on, so I'm happy we didn't get any snow. I've seen some roaming bears up here, though. They've taken to the kind of middle complex area to scope out garbage in the middle of the night. Last night, one of them was over at the bin, just trying to wrestling it up, trying to get into it real good. And I heard him. It was about, I don't know, 11:30 or so. And I didn't really want to. I get what he's doing, but I also know that we can't enable that behavior. So I didn't necessarily go startle the thing. I just stood on the balcony and I clapped really loud and I got his attention. And when he looked over at me, I made myself as big as I could. And I didn't try to be threatening. I just stood calmly in the presence and was just like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. Get out of here. And he did. He walked away. So thankfully, there was no damage caused to the little village area out here because it's really nice. A lot of investment goes into it. And it was pretty cool because they had a group. I don't know if they were just volunteers or if they were some people who owned some places up here or whatnot, but the big spanning area out here, and they got, I don't know, 20, 25 people together, and they all just started collecting garbage out and around. And I said, that's great to see that, we're really taking care of these kind of nature symbiotic infrastructures, so it's places like this where we're built into nature and we're working alongside in concert with the environment. These are in my mind the highest level of how we should be looking at building anything moving forward, is not necessarily just taking up space or moving environment out of the way. How do we adapt alongside it and utilize all that we're doing, what we're trying to develop with the natural effect of everything that's taking place, and try not to disturb the land as much as possible, still steward the land that we stand on, that we choose to develop, because it's when we do that. And this goes back to kind of an old teaching that, I learned about when you're choosing spaces to build lodges or to do ceremony or anything like that, when you're out in nature doing it and you're not creating a kind of space within an infrastructure, a home or that type of a setting. But when you go out into nature, you ask the land. You commune with the land. You don't just go, there, that's the spot I want to do it. And you know, I need to feel this out. I need to talk to the land, because the land will show you. When you work with it, it will give you the best spot to do that ceremony, to build that lodge, to whatever it is that you're communing to do, to accomplish. It will assist because you've actually taken the time to build a relationship. So, yeah, I guess that's an interesting way to start the conversation today. I really didn't know what we were going to be talking about today, so I'm glad the vibe is just showing up. That's kind of a lot of what I've been seeing lately anyways, is there's this, I mean, we've been carrying and there's been a lot of mainstream push towards certain, I guess you could say, activism type stuff. But what I'm really liking seeing is people taking accountability in their own space for being stewards of the land without being judgmental about a process, because we're still developing ourselves as a race, as an intergalactic society, as just communities and within ourselves, learning about what that means on higher and higher levels. Oh, sorry, something's in my eye. Oh my God. So as we're doing that, alleviate or lift the judgment, lift the veil of judgment, know that we're taking steps towards learning how not to do things so we have a better picture on how to do things, right? They're both incredibly important lessons. We always strive for that. I want to do it the right way and I want to get it done the right way the first time, forgetting that failure is one of the greatest teachers that we can ask for, because it allows us to learn so much more, not just about the objective that we're trying to accomplish, but about ourselves. Because when we fail, we have to adapt. So we have to learn to think in a different way and approach something in a different way if we are to be successful, or we just give up. And that never really feels that good, does it? If we're moving towards something like that, because there's that old adage, or quitters quit, and I don't quit things like smoking, and it's like, it's such a recipe for failure, when we should be looking at the aspect of, we're not quitting something, we're moving towards accomplishing something different than continuing a cycle of whatever it is that's no longer bringing value into our lives. That's the only time that I feel we should be moving towards the perception of quit, is making a change, making an adaptation to something in our lives that is no longer serving a purpose, no longer serving value. And that takes a lot of accountability to do. So, perception is a crazy thing. And it really does shift the way that we receive the experiences as they come to us. And again, this all goes back to a lot of the conversations we've had based out of frequency and our state of being. If you wake up in a good mood in the morning, more than likely you're going to be able to have a good day, and you're going to see things in a very positive manner, and somebody trips and falls on the street, and you're in an uplifted mood, you feel great about the day, you're going to go and help them, you're going to offer that feel good energy to everything, because that's what feel good energy wants to do. It wants to go everywhere. Now, on the reverse side of that coin, misery loves company. If you wake up in a crappy mood, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have a crappy day. But there's the interesting thing about this, is we will look at the events of the day as what affects our mood, right? It was, I woke up in a crappy mood today, and then this happened, and I just couldn't shake it. And well, is that really what happened? Because I'm pretty sure the events of life are indifferent. So I think that crappy mood was a choice to hold on to after it was acknowledged, instead of going, oh, that's a vibration I don't like being in. That's not a preferred state. Thank you for showing me a state that I don't want to be in. So I'm going to shift to a state I do want to be in. Reference of preference. But instead we don't. We look at it and go, I'm in a shitty mood, and we identify with it. And we let that course how we look at the events from the day. That same scenario of somebody tripping and falling, we could have a very different negative response, rather than that feel good energy in the first scenario of us going and offering assistance. So again, these vibrations, these states, it all stems with us, and we have to be able to step into a conscious awareness and an acknowledgement of this. And I guess a lot of this really starts for me, that accountability thing. It is so bloody important in our lives to learn what accountability truly means for us, because there's a general perception of accountability, and it just means, to me, the generalized aspect of it is just honing your shit. You own everything that you choose. You understand every action is a choice, and whatever repercussions or results come from that action, you stand presently in, because you understood it was a choice that led you to that outcome, regardless of other influences and other shared energies that were added into the formula. There's still a presence of choice that we always have to take accountability for. And that's the generalized concept. Now, there's different adaptations to this on a personalized level based off of our own experiences. The way that I take accountability as a man in my world with masculinity is going to be different than how somebody else learned to take accountability in their world as a man with masculinity. It doesn't mean that either are, less or more masculine or more present than the other. It just means that we learned how to pull that energy into a conscious awareness differently. And those formulas formulated differently. And we need that within the presence of the multiverse. We have to have these different experiences, these different bands of awareness and intention that connect across the infinity, so that not only do we have reference to it within our own energetic state, but everybody else gets reference to it too, because we're all connected to that web. So, understanding what accountability means to ourselves. And, I guess for me, it goes back to story time. It's story time. Story time for stories. Yeah, for me, it goes back to, the narrative I used to just pummel into myself. And it was this kind of jargon of, I don't know, justification is one way of putting it, but a lot of it was based out of, I really can just say it was a lack of identification more than anything. When I would have new concepts, new teachings, new awarenesses, because God, we know when it comes to spirituality and higher evolution, especially on social media, there are trends and just waves of fads that roll through. And I can say early on in my own journey, I got swept up in some of that crap. And what it led was, you can either follow along with it and completely identify and just use that as your gauge for the rest of your life, or eventually you do what I did and you hit a wall with it and you go, okay, like, I get why I started this, it made sense, but it's not actually adapting to me. I feel like I'm just forcing myself through these cycles because I was told it's the way that it's going to get me to where I want to be. So, but there wasn't any actual presence or authentic identification within self that allowed me to simply absorb teachings and then interpret them within my own personal manner, right? It was just take things at face value. And that's something a lot of us end up doing. Again, there's no judgment within it. This is learning about ourselves, because these ideas, these identification points that we go through, they have a lot of validity within the state that we're in when we identify with them. There's a lot of validation for us in that point. And when we remove the judgment and we simply allow that process to be what it needs to be, regardless of, sometimes it's unpleasant or not, it just flows us into that next state of breakthrough, not breakdown, but breakthrough. And you know what? Maybe even a little bit of breakdown. I don't want to necessarily remove that, because breaking down isn't a horrible thing. There's a big difference between breaking down and just breaking. A lot of people think that they're the same. They're not. When we break, we literally lose strength, we lose will, we lose any resolve to continue moving forward. You're broken. When we break down, there's a lot of emotional upheaval that makes it feel like we're broken, but we're not. We just simply broke down a presence of where we had completely identified ourselves and our lives with and all of that, and that's shattered for us. But that's an opportunity. When we break down, we can either become broken and fall into that pattern of the world that we had identified with and become that shattering process, or we use it as a time of recollection where we get to see all of these pieces of ourselves now present in front of us, and we go, okay, so what do I get to pick and choose? What do I want to build my life to be with all of these present pieces? And because they're no longer a part of any foundational structure of our lives or our identification or perception of that, we also get to remove the pieces that no longer need to be a part of that foundation aspect, even though before we thought they were pivotal. And in some aspects, they kind of were to receive that validation that I was talking about before, just from the current state that we're in. That's why they became foundational pieces, even if they may have been unhealthy. But when the breakdown occurs, we get to see all of them for what they are. And it goes back to, again, what we were talking about at the beginning, that choice, that power of choice. What do we take to rebuild moving forward? We're going to take all of these pieces that, because we were convinced that they were absolutely the foundational pieces of everything we needed moving forward, even though they were unhealthy. So we're going to take them and we're going to put them into this next structure that we're building of our lives. Or are we going to remove those pieces and say, you know what, I'm competent, confident, and capable enough to rebuild this with not only the tools I have on hand while removing these unnecessary pieces, but I can also get new pieces. I can either go out and get some new ones. I can call in people, come in and offer new stuff. It's the whole metaphor can go on and on and on, but basically it's about that accountability, right? Because if our belief structure is just identified to what we see breaking down around us in those moments, we're not taking a presence of self. We were projecting and extending ourselves into this image of our lives, when that image only exists, especially in that perception, because of you. Your life doesn't exist without you. Life happens, but your life doesn't exist without you. Everything that you experience, that you contribute, that you perceive, all of it is unique to you, and it doesn't exist without you. I'm going to finish off my coffee here real quick. Hold on. Okay, so Earth Biscuits. That's what I love about your way of teaching. No judgment, because we all learn differently. It's okay to stand in our own uniqueness. Oh, thank you. Yes, this is it's a key understanding for me. You know, we cannot teach everything. We cannot learn everything in one singular way. If everything was meant to be experienced as just as the one and only right way, we would have one person living in this entire universe doing things in one way. That doesn't sound very exciting. It sounds pretty boring. I think the beauty and the excitement of everything is actually really empowering that uniqueness. You know, if we want to call it imperfections, it's a term that doesn't have to come with negativity, because as far as I'm concerned, the way that we've defined perfection is grossly inaccurate, like grossly inaccurate. You know, it's somebody's control mechanism that they threw into the definition of that word. That's how I see we've defined perfection, when to me the true definition of perfection is creation's full expression in all of its incarnations. Everything. This means the good and the bad, the light and the dark, the pretty and the ugly. All of it needs to be present in unison. That is true perfection. To be able to see the contrast of everything, take it all in, learn from it all, and appreciate it. Because of that contrast, we get to see things that aren't within our state of preferred vibration, which allows us to reinforce that state further and further every time we encounter something that is outside of that preferred state. It never has to be a suffering or a negative experience. And we should never invalidate anything in the universe either, especially when we experience it. That is meant to reinforce our conscious present state all the time, especially considering how often we're shifting between parallel states of vibration. Every chance we get to reinforce a conscious awareness of that, we should take, and we should be honored and grateful for every step of the way. It's a really ever expanding, non-stop journey, and it's a beautiful thing, because you know, every time we think, oh, I've grown up, I'm a real boy, we realize no, there's somebody still pulling a few strings on this level, and we got to snip those things off and climb up again. It's an incredible process. and I even look at that, kind of taking that metaphor, because what I mean by strings being pulled is not necessarily that somebody's controlling us on all levels. I mean that there is there is something else beyond our current state of awareness that has influence on our current state of awareness. So I think, like, an interesting way of looking at it is even looking at some of the movies, like, A Bug's Life or Ants, or there was even an episode that South Park did about lice, and this entire civilization that they had developed on a child's head, and they've got towers and buildings and cities and police forces and mayors, and it was incredible. But at the same time, there's kind of some validation to that, because on all different microscopic and quantum levels, there are those types of evolutionary states, right? Beings will just find ways to evolve no matter what reality or level of reality they exist on. So every time we think we hit a plateau and, oh, I've got this, there's going to be something that pushes us to a point where we go, oh my God, there's a whole world beyond this world. Even in Men in Black, right? Where I can't remember if it was one or two. I think it was two, where they open up the locker at the end and he goes, Slick, you've got no idea. Because they thought that, when they opened up the locker themselves, the first time, they had a little civilization that worshipped K and J. And they go, holy crap, there's a whole little civilization. They don't even know they're living in a locker. And then by the end of the movie, he goes, Slick, you got no idea. And he opens up another door, and they're inside the locker with this giant universe around them. And these are such true statements when we're able to, look past the entertainment value of the stuff. But at the same time, I also like appreciating things for the entertainment value. This is why I rewatch a lot of stuff too. First watch, depending on what state I'm in, I'll be like, hey, this one's just entertainment, no analysis, none of that crap. And I just want to watch it and take it in. Maybe, if I catch a few things because I just can't miss them, I'll take notes and I'll be like, hey, when I rewatch, those are the points I got to pay attention to. But there's a process to that for me. Every single time that, I see something that has a lot of that truth and a lot of those kind of beta level teachings in them for everyone to get buried within their subconscious, I'll rewatch a bunch of times, because I also don't want to take away from the fact that I'm here to have a human experience, right? As I'm casting and projecting my light through all of these multiversion and dimensional filters to take this form, and I will always be that divine presence. I'm here to experience this life, this form. So I don't want to, miss out on the human aspects of things either. Earth Biscuit, we are all perfect because at this very moment we are the best that we can be, even though we are still in motion. And this is where we find this presence of self-love, self-gratitude, understanding that in any given moment, you are exactly where you need to be, with who you need to be with, doing the things that you need to do, finding the rhythm, finding the belief in that flow allows us to just carry that state through everything that we do. And it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, of even when we find ourselves present with something that we may not prefer, that state allows us to flow it into something that we can use as reference to enforce what we do prefer. It's a beautiful state. And knowing that while we are always where we need to be, that doesn't necessarily mean that we ever stop growing either, so it's one of these fine lines of trying not to overthink it, because the human mind it's not meant to comprehend why things happen. It's just meant to comprehend what's happening in the moment. So, this is where we get so confused, I feel, a lot of the time, when we hit these types of minor contradictions where, oh, I'm always growing, I'm always going to be bettering myself, but I'm the best that I can be in any given moment. Well, yes, it's yes and yes, they're both true. It doesn't have to be this or that. It should be this and that. That's a higher quantum level of receiving things. And when we're able to really perceive it on that unified collective state, we can let go of so much of that stress and that confusion that comes with trying to over process or over analyze really just states of being. You know, half of our intergalactic title is human being, yet we have such a hard time just being. We really don't. How often do you just be? It's a really hard concept for most of us to be able to grasp. And society was kind of set up in that way too, where it's wasn't really built to allow us to take on that moniker of being within life. It made us, you know, doers. We were human doers, human laborers. And um it's not to take away the value from labor and contribution or duty either, because there's a divine presence that comes with honoring sovereign duty and contribution and dedication to others and ourselves on that same level, because we can't really offer that to other people if we aren't offering it to ourselves first. But you know, there's, as we all know, society was set up within a control state of that mechanism, where taking advantage of, I feel, this core fundamental aspect of who we are as human beings, knowing that that triggers a very spiritual and a very soul activating response within us to, you know, dedicate ourselves to contribution and duty. It got twisted into, you know, almost slave labor, and in essence, where we weren't doing it to just contribute back to society, even though we were told that's what we were doing. It turned into very much so a monopoly and pyramid schemes across all the entire board, where society wasn't benefiting. It was everybody else that owned these corporate schemes that were benefiting. So but this goes back to, you know, like I said, fundamental stuff. And these are, I think that these are awarenesses that not only a lot of the societal structure, the builders of the societal structures were aware of, but some of us are aware of too on a very basic level as principles, fundamental principles, but we don't take as much conscious awareness to the fact that we're actually doing these things because we're doing them subconsciously. So, an example of this is, you know, so much of the way our day to day operates triggers a, I want to say, an artificial flight or fight response within us. This isn't, and it's interesting because this is goes back to very primal genetics, where there are chemical responses that come up when we have that fight or flight instinct kick in, and it's actually healthy. Like there's a lot of hormonal and chemical distribution that goes through the body when we have these responses in our world, and when these instincts flare up, depending on the natural catalyst for it, and then b, how we actually respond to it, will dictate the flow of that chemical response. And this can even be related to some of the stuff that we've talked about with like kundalini energy and semen retention, for example. When we're doing it properly and we have a conscious awareness of, again, that chemical flow in the body, we can direct it, we can utilize it. When it comes to the fight or flight response and those instincts, these very, very primal responses, it gets kicked in with things like, you know, the bank calling because we're behind on our debt. You were late 15 minutes for work and you got to have a meeting with the boss after. It's these really kind of minuscule, just mundane things that at the end of it hold no real regard in the aspect of life. It's the way that we were conditioned to go through the execution of our day to day and think that that's life. And then the importance that we put onto these things put a belief structure in us where we trigger an artificial flight or fight response. Because when you have that, so when you get a call from the bank because you're behind on debt and that gets activated, or when you have to go sit down with your boss and you know you're going to get, you know, a scolding, and that instinct gets activated, these are not natural environments and scenarios for this chemical reaction to be stirred up within us. So our response is not a natural response. We don't actually go into the fight or flight response that is necessary to process those chemicals. And they end up, I don't know exactly scientifically what ends up happening with the chemicals when we don't distribute them properly. I don't know if, you know, they kind of clam up and they stay where they are, if it just fizzles out, kind of like with the semen retention energy and that oil that comes down from the medulla. I haven't looked into it enough yet, but I just know that those unnatural scenarios give us an unnatural response to those activators, and it puts us in a state, not just again where the chemicals don't get distributed properly, but the energy flow, our psyche, our emotion, our entire mentality around that scenario gets all buggered up because of that chemical retention and because of the fact that it was such an unnatural scenario to have that response, that you gotta go back to your job after, or you gotta go take care of your kids after, or whatever it is that actually has some value to you. You got to go back to doing something mundane after you just had this chemical survival fight or flight instinct and chemical response in us. So, you know, when we have these kind of scenarios that we don't even realize are taking place internally, it's very understandable why so many people have an unconscious upset to their lives, which is so much under the premise of why I release judgment more and more and more as I learn deeper about these things. Because everybody is just going through something on a level that they probably don't even understand. So how the hell could I judge whatever it is that they're projecting when they're just trying to figure things out for themselves? The steps that we take are the things that actually lead us to, I guess, bettering or unbettering, or not bettering ourselves, I should say. So it's just having the awareness and the accountability to say, I don't feel happy doing this, or I'm causing suffering doing this, or something along these lines. But it again boils down to the accountability and then the belief structure on it. Because so often when people live in that unconscious response and they have all of these chemical reactions in them and they don't really even know why they react the way that they do in certain scenarios, and then why they pull those types of scenarios into their lives because of their frequency, their state of frequency, um, they end up having this pattern happen so often that a belief structure gets kicked in that they're the ones who are poisoned. They're the ones that are you know, the toxic thing, and everyone else in the world is trying to purge them from their lives. And it's a really nasty state to fall into. Tango, all I know is I am magnificent, perfect in every way. How can I get any better than that? Len, truly should keep showing yourself all that love, Tango. That's the key, is constantly remind yourself, I am everything that I love about me. Why would I ever want to do anything differently that I don't love? And again, taking the accountability of saying, oh, when I do this, if I'm hurting somebody or if I'm creating suffering, maybe I don't love that feeling. Maybe I'm not doing things in a way that's benefiting my vibration. And then at the same time, needing contrast in the world. If you're an asshole and you feel fine and good about being an asshole, go be an asshole. We need assholes out there, trust me, because it allows the nice people to reinforce themselves further as nice people. And it doesn't necessarily mean that assholes aren't good people, they're just assholes. It does, you know, and again, removing the judgment on these things, allowing things to simply be what they are, as they present themselves, because that's the choice. I don't have to judge you. You're going to show me everything about who you are when you show up, and I'm just going to give you the space to do it. Earth Biscuit, the receptors aren't able to grab the neurochemicals. So then we get the anxiety and the depression. Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So this is going back to the fight or flight response, right? The neuroreceptors don't receive the chemical. And then we get the anxiety, we get the depression, and which it perfectly falls in line with even how I was saying, having to go back to mundane activities after having a survival instinct kick up. Yes, you're going to feel anxiety. Yes, you're going to feel things like depression because there's a chemical imbalance that's taking place within us. And then we have these unnatural, unconscious responses. So going back to having this belief structure of, oh, it keeps happening to me. I keep repeating it. I'm the poison. I'm the poison. That belief structure not only is completely, and it's kind of confusing because we almost feel like we're taking accountability. No, it's me. I'm the bad one. I'm the bad one. Instead of just looking at the scenario for what it was, knowing it was a shared experience, you can't ever be the entirety of something that took place when other people have involved themselves or shared the experience with you. But again, your life is yours, doesn't exist without you. So taking accountability for our presence in the experience is something different than just going, oh, it's me. I'm the one that fucked up. If you shared something with somebody and they're the ones taking the blame, and you're part of it or whatever, or you even know that they didn't have a part in it, but they have convinced themselves that they do, that's when it's on us to say, look, this was on me. This isn't on you. This is on me. But we're not blaming ourselves for it. We're owning the actions because we're dealing with the outcomes. When we fall into that scenario, oh, I'm the bad thing, I'm the toxic thing, all we're doing is blaming. All we're doing is judging ourselves. We're not standing present in whatever the scenario was that took place and going, okay, I was here for this. I know that I was a part of this. I may not have liked what took place, but damn it, I got to clean up whatever happened. Like there's still things that need to progress. Energy moves forward. Life continues to move on. So standing present in the outcomes of whatever the scenario is allows us to take that accountability while removing the judgment. We don't have to shit on ourselves because we did something bad. Understand that A, mistakes happen, and B, if it was a conscious choice to do something bad, take the accountability in the presence of why you made that decision and know the repercussions and the ripple effects that it had, because it's going to give you reference to whether or not it's a part of your authentic frequency or if it was being influenced. Those subconscious responses that we're talking about. Influence comes from everywhere. It's we look at it from the scenarios that we go through in life on the day to day, the people that we share these things with, the emotional encounters, the conversations that we have. All of these different pieces play little bits of influence into our lives, and that's okay. But knowing that those influences, the less conscious awareness that we are taking to how those influences are coming and being presented to us, we're actually allowing them to influence us at that point rather than simply present themselves as information. These are things that I know are coming through, and I'm going, oh, this is bringing up something in me that either A, I need to look at, or B, I get to say, hey, this is just outside of my vibration, and it's making me aware that it's outside of my vibration. So I'm just going to get back further into my state. That's it. Reinforce further, right? Utilize everything that comes presently to us, but removing the judgment, because again, there's an indifference that needs to happen with it. This is where our true power as alchemists and wizards really come in at the end of the day. Okay, so if we have any questions, let's go through quickly. And Tango, Alex, can you talk about the transmutation of sexual energy? Can you explain that, please? Exactly how do you move that energy? Okay. Well, there's a few different variations to this. So when we're going through individual sexual awakenings. I mean, when you're discovering your sexual power, but you may not be in a relationship, you may not, have a partner to explore what that new energy and that new power is, doing things like Kundalini awakening, semen retention, things like that. The transmutation process really falls in line with a lot of what we've been talking about today. There is such a high level of accountability that needs to be taken within oneself, because there are things that are getting activated from childhood to uh, things that are going to be able to hold reference in old age as we move through the rest of our lives as well. So it spans forward and back. And knowing that we're doing it individually, we don't have somebody else again to share this with. There's a big level of vulnerability, I guess, is a really good way of putting it. So often we think that being vulnerable means doing it for somebody else. Well, you only get to that state when you're comfortable enough with your own vulnerability first. Otherwise, you're reluctantly being vulnerable, and that puts us in a state of resentment at one point or another. Either then, later, it doesn't matter. Resentment will absolutely come up when we do anything reluctantly. It's just a part of that process. So, knowing that that vulnerability has to stem with you first, that's part of that transmutation, I would say, catalyst when you're doing an individual sexual awakening, sexual energy awakening. um yeah, being really open, being really vulnerable, honest, and accountable with yourself, and knowing that sexual energy is creation. It is the energy of creation, right? Everything is conceived in this third dimensional realm by reproduction and sexual energy, right? Everything, it has to connect with two pieces to reproduce, right? This is the way it works in this world. This is also part of the teachings that we get from Star Age, well, from David Piltz, I should say, White Star teachings. Sasquatch come here to third dimension to make babies, because they can't do it in the same way in fourth and fifth that we can do here. You don't take a physical corporal form in those other dimensions the way that we do in third dimension. So there's that creation activation that's going to come with that. And within that creation, you're going to find new pieces of yourself, knowing that that sexual expansion, once it starts, it's simply a way for you to create a new version of yourself with how you're going to interact with the rest of the world. This includes partners, this includes jobs, um, really any of that aspect that involves you inputting your energy to create something else, right? That's where a lot of this individual transmutation activation comes from. When we're doing it with a partner, for example, um, hopefully, if we did the steps that I was just talking about with the vulnerability and learning about that within ourselves first, when we show up present that way in that relationship, we already know how to be vulnerable. We're confident in that vulnerability. We then get to actually explore everything that goes beyond that. So, learning about somebody else's sexual creative process, energy, and evolution not only allows us to dive into our own a little bit further, but then when we connect those points and we're learning to meld the two together, especially synchronistically, and we're not just throwing it away, having casual, meaningless sex, but really making love and tapping into that partnership energy and the unification that takes place there is points that you can reach that are absolutely interstellar and intergalactic. Um, Point being, this energy alone doesn't even necessarily have to have a physical connection to take off in this manner. The very first time I discovered about this stuff was the first time I had met a soulmate in my world. And it was so insanely powerful. It still has an echo in my current state now on the things that took place and the development that happened because of that connection. But one of the biggest things that enlightened me to what I'm talking about now because of that connection, we never hooked up, we never had sex, we never even kissed, right? We certainly spent time together, and we developed an intimate connection without question. It just never got to that physical point. There was a lot of static in between. And to be honest, the physical, emotional, and mental states of where we were in these lives just weren't compatible at those points in time. But the energy was so unified already without our bodies having to even touch. As I went through meditation and I went through dream states later, I discovered that her DNA and my DNA was actually taken and used to create starseed children. There are 4 starseed children that were born from the unification of our energy in these higher dimensional planes. And I saw them in visions. And when I say I broke down, heaving, crying, I can't be more clear and descriptive than that. It was one of those like just obnoxious. It was horrifyingly emotional, but so beautiful because I've never seen a presence like that. I've never felt a presence like that. And knowing that they were my children, it was incredibly powerful. So these are the types of unification processes when we allow a true state of just unity, right? With there, again, there's no judgment, there's no expectation, there's no you got to fit this role in my life. That took place while all the physical bullshit was still getting sorted out. And trust me, it took years to get that crap sorted out. But the energy just said, nope, I'm going to work. I'm doing what I need to do. And I think that there was some, beings that interacted in that as well. But it was one of the most powerful experiences that I had gone through alchemically with a sexual awakening with somebody without even having sex. It was just the creation energy, right? So I hope that highlights it a little bit further. Is there any other question? Oh, Tango, can we use our breath to move it to the pineal gland? Yes. So breath and vibration is what moves it up, is a great way to put it. So while you're breathing, while you're meditating, have your mouth closed, put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. And to be honest, I don't even notice half the time anymore. It's my mind's just always there because it's not just a spiritual practice. We learned about this in ninjutsu as well. It's an energy conduit. When our tongue is connected to the roof of the mouth or even in between the teeth, it carries the vibrations that usually dissipate right around this area, and it carries them up into the higher head, a higher mind aspect. So sitting, breathing, have the tongue on the roof of your mouth. What I can do, I have a wide tongue. I'll stretch my tongue out and I'll put it in between my teeth on the sides of my jaw and press my tongue up on the roof of my mouth when I'm consciously doing this. And I will find a tone, find like a find a tone that just lights your soul up, makes you get the goosebumps. And when you find that tone, breathe deep, hold, and allow that tone and that vibration through your breath work, conscious, calm, deep breath work, and then express the tone, let it carry through. And I promise it'll move any of that stuff, the oils, the chemicals, the energetic blocks. If there's any calcified stuff, that's how we do decalcification, is you carry vibrations and you carry certain frequencies to the calcified area, and the vibrations eventually break it open and break it free. Funny, I find my tongue doing that all the time. Adventures from Connection, right? So when you hit a certain kind of flow state, your body just knows, right? And this even goes to Reiki. When I teach Reiki, some of the very first lessons that I go, and you know, you learn about hand positions and all of that, yada yada yada. I teach that this is such an intrinsic part of a natural awareness of our gifts. When you're young and you bang your knee, you hit your elbow on something, what's the first thing that you do? You grab it with your hand and you soothe the pain by holding it and putting your hands over top of it. It's Reiki. It's literally Reiki. We don't even know it. We don't have the attunements at that point. We're not, you know, putting a conscious intention into opening ourselves up to the direction of Reiki, but it's Reiki. It's a natural thing that we immediately just go, ow, 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 ow. And we try to soothe that pain. We soothe that imbalance of frequency in our world, right? The body just knows. This is something we learn about in martial arts as well. When you're early, we train certain stances and certain postures and movements because we're actually untraining our body. Yes, we're learning those movements, but more importantly, we're actually removing any context of preconditioned movement that wasn't really maybe as beneficial or as productive or efficient as we thought it really was, because there was no conscious awareness to how our body got conditioned like that. It was just years and years of routine, whatever that routine was. So creating a new routine to unlearn the conditioning, and then learn new conditioning, that comes secondary, because you have to unlearn first. And then you start taking a more conscious presence to certain things like, oh, okay, this is the movement, this is the structure. But again, there's still so much extension, projection on it. We do it so much that eventually it just clicks and the body just knows what to do. When we give into that, the body just goes and it feels, oh, there's direction, there's danger, there's something coming, and it just moves. If you're falling in a certain way when you've trained to a certain degree, you don't need to think about how to catch yourself. Your body just knows how to salvage what it needs to do. And to be honest, we're able to achieve this without training, but it takes extreme scenarios. And I mean, usually extreme scenarios, because we have to remove all thought. You cannot consciously let your body do something it knows to do by telling it. You got to just trust your body and allow it to do what it needs to do. So that takes intense extreme scenarios to do without training. Even with training, it's a process. It takes so long to go through all of the different learning steps and blocks that come with the different levels of awareness to it. Because again, like I talked about at the beginning, once you think you got it, there's a whole layer behind that you go, oh my God, there's wow, I don't know shit. And that is a beautiful concept to hit, when you know what you know, but you also know you don't know shit. Oh, it's a beautiful, humbling power. Oh, it's beautiful. That's wonderful. Okay. Do we have any other questions that we need to go over? No, I think that's about it. Unless there's any from Rumble, but I don't know if I don't think there's any from Rumble. So that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for today. We may go a little bit early here. I mean, I don't really have any plans for this weekend. I gotta get some stuff done. I gotta get my car looked at because I still gotta head out to Calgary and see my family. I gotta get a lot of that taken care of because there's visits out there of people I haven't seen in years and years and years. So I really gotta go. I gotta go visit some people and see my family. Yeah, I mean, other than that, I'm gonna be continuing every day, furthering these concepts of awareness and hoping to express them with you, to have some relevance, have some reference in your world and your journey, and knowing that we just get to be here to share it together is one of the greatest gifts that we could ever exchange. So I'm so thankful for that. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for watching, for tuning in. Check me out on my website when you get a chance. David Piltz and I are getting ready to host an inner shaman workshop coming up here very soon. A few different classes he's going to be teaching in there. One class I'm going to be heading for power animal discovery, the distinctions between animal guides and power animals, the references in our world, how it even translates through certain movements like dance and martial arts. So if you guys get a chance, reach out to David Piltz and sign up for that course. We'd love to see you. Thank you, Alex, for the show. My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm so glad that I can offer this space for everyone to be here and share it with me. Thank you for being here to listen. I mean, I'd still be talking, but it makes it a lot better that you're here too. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, and have a wonderful week and week ahead of you. Take care.